Hello again. So where am I today? Well, I'm still at camp, and this is the cross and the altar for the outdoor chapel. And you may not be able to see it, but behind all of this brush and trees is the lake that I talked about from the other day when we covered the psalm. So I thought it would be appropriate for this message, the message on the gospel, to use the chapel. It seemed to make sense to me. And once again, I'm looking into the sun, so the sunglasses, no green shirt today. Again, if you have any thoughts or comments, you can leave them below the video in the comments section. I will be notified as to there being something there. And if it's something I need to respond to, I certainly will. So today we're looking at the Gospel according to St. John in the 11th chapter, verses 32 through 44. Glory to you, O Lord. Through the raising of Lazarus, Jesus offers a world vision of life to come, when death and weeping will be no more. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who had opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and the stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to him, "Unbind him and let him go." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. There are certain times within the various 4 Gospels where theologians will call a specific event a turning point. This Gospel reading, raising Lazarus from the dead, is one such event in John's Gospel, a turning point for Jesus' ministry. Going back to John chapter 2, that chapter also begins with a turning point. The wedding at Cana, when Jesus turns water into wine, the first of his miracles, according to John's Gospel. And then moving forward from that, in John's Gospel, there has been a series of signs. What John calls signs, we might say there were wonders, we might say they were miracles, or some such language. But these were all signs performed by Jesus. And John consistently calls these signs because he wants to remind us that signs point toward something else. They're not in and of themselves the important thing. Do they matter? Certainly. Does it matter that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead? Yes, it does. Although it was a sign to point to something else. In that case, something much greater, the resurrection of Jesus. Here at camp, I have had to rely on signs because I don't know my way around. So when I wanted to find the lake, I had to follow the signs. When I wanted to find the campsite, I had to follow the signs. When I wanted to find the cabins, I had to follow the signs. And to find this wonderful outdoor chapel, I had to follow the signs. For the sign of today's gospel reading, there are two reactions, and also for the other signs that Jesus does in the Gospel of John. One reaction is people come to believe, and sometimes they also start to worship Jesus. On the other hand, there is a reaction from the religious and political leaders. Sometimes those are both the same thing. They become angry and resentful. Today's reading specifically, raising Lazarus from the dead, generates a great deal of anger and resentment. So much so that the religious leaders / political leaders are feeling a threat to their power. So what do? They plot to kill Jesus. Listen to some of the verses that come after today's reading. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, "What are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come, and they will destroy both our holy place and our nation." So from that day on, they planned to put Jesus to death. There's a fancy term that theologians like to throw around sometimes, and the word is Christology, which really means answering the question about who is Jesus and why did Jesus come into this world. The pivotal / turning point revealed in this gospel that I've read for you today points us toward the answer about why Jesus came into the world. Jesus already knows the power of God, what God can do, what God will do, and in this case, what God will do for Lazarus. So the verses prior to today's gospel reading make Jesus seem ambivalent to Lazarus' death. And it also confuses the disciples. Why did they wait 4 days? It equally becomes clear that the disciples, including Mary and Martha, don't know the power of God, what it can do and what it will do for Lazarus. Listen again to verse 32. Mary tells Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And then again, verse 37, some of the other Jews that are there, and they're hanging around with Mary and Martha and the friends and family of Lazarus, and they ask another important question that shows they just don't understand the full power of God. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Well, of course he could. But that's missing the point. Mary and the others, they just did not understand the power over death that God, through Jesus the Christ, can wield. They recognize that Jesus has power, yet they have limited that power to only being able to keep Lazarus from dying. within this context of limited understanding of who Jesus is and why Jesus came, this Christology, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, completely dead. The text says he's been 4 days in the tomb. 3 days in the tomb would have been enough to say, yes, he was certainly dead. It's been 4 days, so even more certain. He's completely dead. And Jesus takes that Lazarus, the completely dead Lazarus, from the tomb to being completely alive. It's a sign. It's also an instruction for Jesus to open up people's understanding about the deeper truths of his being. Jesus' Christology. Who Jesus is, why did Jesus come? The story in John's Gospel provides a turning point for Jesus' ministry, also a turning point in people's understanding of who Jesus is, why Jesus came into this world. John gives us a concrete, real-life example, exhibition, if you will, of the resurrection and resurrection life that can be accomplished through the power of Jesus. Jesus in John's Gospel wants us to understand that death is not the end of the story. Also, that all of those emotions that are revealed by those who are gathered around Lazarus' family, what we heard about in the second reading, despair, grief, hopelessness, mourning, wailing, crying, pain. In the light of who Jesus is, those all become positive emotions, shouts of praises, filled with joy, resurrected life. Martha and Mary and the Jewish onlookers trust that Jesus has power, but they limited that power because they lacked imagination. They lacked the understanding of the infinite possibility of Jesus' power. When you limit Jesus' power, there's too much if only thinking. If only you had been here, Jesus. Why Jesus came into this world was to open our minds, all readers' minds of the gospel, to the God who, as we read in the introduction to the second reading, resides fully with God's people, so that mourning, despair, and pain have been eradicated. Thank you for joining me in this journey that we've taken this week as I've come to you from Luther Springs, one of the camps under the umbrella of Novus Way. And I appreciate having been here this week. I appreciate you joining me here this week via videos. And hopefully sometime maybe you can find time or a reason to come and enjoy this beautiful place. Thank you again. Remember, if you have any comments or questions or thoughts to leave, please leave them in the comment section below this video. Take care. Have a great day. God bless.